Hi, everybody. This is Damien from Legion Life. As you know, we're all about sharing inspirational stories about people who are living their best life after 40, people who are living an ageless lifestyle, people who don't want to be defined by their age and believe they can live legendary lives regardless of what age they are. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Wendy Searle. Wendy has got a pretty remarkable story. She is a mother of four, and at 42 years old, decided she, or didn't decide at 42, but at the age of 42, she actually was one of 7 women to traverse from the coastline of Antarctica to the South Pole. So how are you going today, Wendy?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. So to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of background about yourself. So growing up, were you into the outdoors, adventure sports?
So I have to tell you that when I was younger, my family used to take us always on holiday to the UK. So we went usually to the Lake District, which people in England will know as being sort of, it's very beautiful. It's one of the most remote places in England, if there is such a thing. And we went on these walking holidays or cycling holidays, and I honestly hated it. There are so many pictures of me when I was little, kind of looking like so fed up, wishing it would be over. And my mother always says to me now, she says, I can't believe it was you out of all the children who actually came back to it and fell in love with the outdoors. And I think well, partly I think it's when you're younger you have kind of wellies and slightly rubbish kit because you're going to outgrow it. So
Yeah.
you're kind of a bit wet, you're a bit fed up, and I really couldn't see the point. So honestly, it's been a complete sort of 180 for me. So after I had my first daughter, so I was only probably about 23, 24, and just started doing, we have a thing called Race for Life, which is a mass participation 5K event in the days before park run. And I did that as a kind of annual thing. So I took up a bit of jogging, and then I got into, I joined a running club and became determined to do a marathon. And the marathon became sort of 5 marathons and an ultra marathon. And I think, because I had my family quite young and I've got 4 children, so I was in that kind of zone, in that space for a really long time, that that kind of adventurous part of me never had chance to get out.
Yeah.
But then when I was getting on for almost 40, when I kind of came to this adventuring world, and I met a team that, through the job I had at the time, I met a team that were doing a traverse of Antarctica. And I knew literally nothing about Antarctica. I could probably have pointed to it on a map, but beyond that, I'd never heard of, really. I kind of vaguely knew of Shackleton and Scott. I'd vaguely heard their names. I couldn't really have told you anything about it. So it's kind of one of the key things for me is that you don't kind of come to these things necessarily at the age of 18, 20, 25. And if you haven't done them by then, it's never going to be there for you. Or if it's not a childhood dream, if it's not a kind of long held ambition, then it's not a valid thing either. And I kind of want to do away with that idea, because as you know, when you get to sort of 40s, 50s, you realize that life isn't linear. It's not straightforward. You kind of it meanders around, and you take the opportunities that come along and you see where it leads. And that's definitely how the whole, it's completely changed my life. And I met this team and I thought, oh, this sounds really interesting actually,
Yeah.
and read a few books, read a bit of polar history. And the more I read about it and the more I learned about it, the more drawn into this whole idea of polar travel I became. And then I was completely hooked.
Awesome. So how did the decision actually come about to, I'm going to actually traverse the kind of like Antarctic?
I mean, there's a really, really long version, or there's a slightly edited highlight. So I can almost remember the moment that when I thought, actually, I really want to have a go at this. And I was sat with this same group. I'd gone on a training weekend with them to gather some content for the charity they were promoting. And I was sat at the back, and they were being given this presentation about cold weather injuries, and they flashed up things on the screen with, blackened fingers and people with their faces falling off and things. And my colleague leant over to me and said, oh my goodness, this is absolutely horrendous. And I thought, do you know what, this looks brilliant. I really want to see if I could have a go at this. And I think the thing was that, the team that I was, with at the time, they were an army team. they were pretty together. They had some funding through the army, you know, big strong lads, loads of experience, not all in the polar world, but certainly lots of experience kind of in the adventure space. One of them had like paramotored across Australia. I don't know, they were like super experienced. And I looked at me compared to them and I thought, you know, can somebody who, you know, I'm a mother, I've got a regular job, I don't have any money down the back of the sofa, you know, polo travel is really super expensive. I couldn't even ski, you know, I couldn't see how I was going to get the time off work to do this. But I wonder if someone could go from a standing start to achieving something so kind of massive. And I was like, right, I'm gonna see if this is possible. And that's really part of the whole legacy of it, and the whole kind of message that I'm trying to get out to people is that, you know, even if you have none of those things, you know, extraordinary things are achievable.
Yeah. No, it's pretty amazing. Like, as you said, most people will basically look at such a project or an undertaking and go, there's no way I can do that. And then kind of like immediately kind of like dismiss it. So, you know, how do you get through all of those limiting beliefs? Like, you know, you must have been going through your head, you know, as you said, like, I'm not a skier, I'm not a mudder, I'm a mother, like I'm a busy lady anyway in my normal kind of life, you know, and then as you said, you had these other kind of like reference models, army, adventure kind of like thing, and going, I'm nothing like these, but you were able to kind of like work through all of those things that most people would have kind of like gone, oh, there's no way I can do it. So how did you get through it? And then what would you say to other people?
Such a good question. I'm not sure I have those limiting beliefs. I definitely think that, you know, I've always believed anything is possible. Not, you know, not necessarily like I can do anything, but that,
Yeah,
you know, all things are possible. And my certainly my father in particular instilled those values in me that, you know, and it's quite a sort of I don't know, like Presbyterian work ethic thing, but you know, that you work hard and you achieve things. And, you know, it's never that straightforward. But at least you know, that was my dad's side, and my mum, who's much softer, always said, you know, just try your best. But actually she had a point, because, you know, if you absolutely put everything into something, then at least, you know, even if I hadn't have achieved it, I hadn't have got the money, I hadn't have, you know, made it to the finish, whatever, at least you've put everything into it, you know, to see whether or not it is possible. So it never occurred to me that I wasn't going to try. It occurred to me plenty of times that I might not get there for lots of
yeah,
different reasons, but I never thought, well, you know, it's impossible, I'm not even going to attempt it, because you know, we can achieve so much more than, you know, we put those limits on ourselves mentally, physically, that, you know, that, oh, you know, it's too difficult, or I haven't got the money, or, you know, I'll never get the time off work, or, I mean, some people genuinely think, why would you want to do that, which is something slightly different. But
yeah,
you know, that I don't really think that I had those limiting beliefs, because I just think, you know, at least if you've, and that's the kind of takeaway for me, I think, is that if you've given it everything and it doesn't work out, you know, fair enough, but at least you've put something into it, you've seen how far you can get, and, you know, it's amazing what you can achieve, and you can always do more than you think you can.
yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's the message, is just like give it a go. Like, you know, don't kind of like second guess your possibilities of being able to do it. Just like try, and then, you know, basically be more of a solution kind of like orientation, as opposed to, you know, what is a problem, and then, oh, okay, I can't do it. So like just try to find a solution.
Exactly. And I think, you know, Einstein had it right, and he has this great quote which I kind of try and live by, and he said, never surround yourself with negative people, they have a problem for every solution.
Yeah,
So my thought to everything is usually, well, why not, you know, why not you, why isn't this possible? And people kind of go, well, you can't do that because the rules say this, or the limits are this, but you know, what about if we flip that on its head and thought, well, you know, let's change the rules, let's push the limits, you know, and see what we can do.
no, awesome. So firstly, what was your family's reaction when you go, you know, laid it out for them? I'm going to the Antarctica and this is what I'm going to do. So what was their reaction?
I don't think any of us really knew how much of an undertaking and how all consuming it was going to be. So it started as something quite small, as it wasn't like, I'm going to do this and, you know, off I go. It was a real kind of evolution, a real gradual realization that this was going to be a thing. And I had to tick certain boxes. So to be let loose by the logistics company in solo in Antarctica, they like to know that you've spent some time at -30 and below, that you've done lots of solo work. They ideally climbed a few mountains, which I hadn't done. So I had to set about going and doing all those things. So I skied across Greenland. I spent some time alone in Iceland, and I ticked all those boxes. And I was still not kind of thinking this is definitely going to happen, but I was always working towards it. So it probably wasn't until a year out that I thought, actually, this is something that it's almost had a life of its own, which made it much easier when I went to try and go to corporates and go to people to say support. It's very un-British and quite women are not very good at it generally, to say, support me, I'm brilliant. So but I was able to say support the expedition, because this expedition is awesome. Look at what this is going to achieve. Look at what this is going to say to everybody out there. And people really got it. And so my poor family by that point were, we were too drawn in to back out. And so they were totally backed me 100%. They'd come out on training trips with me. If we went on holiday, where I could train, was there a gym? It's almost like my very Catholic friend, when they used to go on holiday, the first thing they had to find was a church. The first thing I had to do was go and do my training and, find a gym. And, they bring me food supplies sometimes if I was out in the local area, and just really kind of go along with it. I can clearly remember my poor family, but I can clearly remember one parents' evening. I parked a mile away from the school so I could do enough lunges, because that was the training for the night, was like however many 100 lunges. So I lunged into parents' evening, and bless them, the school, all the schools were amazing actually, because my kids were all at different schools, but that school in particular really kind of embraced this idea that I was going to do this thing. They produced flags for me to take with me as well. And the fact that I kind of lunged sweatily into parents' evening, nobody batted an eyelid. Everyone was just, super excited for the expedition. So literally everyone I knew, family, friends, colleagues, 99% of people were sort of along for the ride and totally, were willing me along.
Oh, awesome. So let's go back a little bit. So you mentioned the company that kind of like will take you to Antarctica to kind of like send you off. They have a kind of like a list of criteria, and then so you basically, in part of your investigation of what you needed to do, you identified this company, and then you saw the list, and then you went through a process of ticking them off. So what are some of the key elements you need to kind of like demonstrate to them to be able to do a solo expedition?
I'm not sure how prescriptive it is, or if they do it on a sort of case-by-case basis, because the polar community, the polar world, is really small. So yeah. I went off to do the first time I'd really ever seen snow properly, and stepped out into this blizzard off the train in Norway. I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? And I spent 2 weeks with an amazing polar ninja called Hannah McKean, and she took me through everything from, do you wear gloves or mitts, or why, these boots or those boots, how do you actually ski, how do you pull a sled, which is called a pulk, so how do you pull these pulks, how do you navigate, what do you eat? And it's a really kind of involved, quite sort of specific and detailed process, because you've got to there's only one way you can put your tent up, and if you don't put it up that way, the wind's going to take you out. If you let your hands be exposed for too long, then you might get hypothermia, frostbite, enough damage not to be able to work your sat phone and call for rescue. So there's high risk, but you mitigate that by the thorough training. So I did those 2 weeks, probably the hardest 2 weeks that I've ever done. But that's sort of the point, because at the time you think, those 2 weeks out in Norway, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Not sure I can do anything harder than that. And then I went and skied across Greenland for 27 days. And that was a crazy, proper epic adventure as part of a team of 6. We had hurricanes. We investigated this World War II leftover listening station partway through the journey. We met another team along the way. And the whole thing was a crazy adventure, but we made it, we succeeded. But then I finished and thought, oh, I'm not sure I can do anything harder than that. Well, that was like probably the hardest thing I can do.
Yeah.
And then you get to Antarctica, the kind of the big one, and you're like, I'm not sure how this is going to go. Greenland was so hard, and then it's amazing what you can actually do, and actually finishing it and succeeding at the Antarctic trip has made me feel like, right, you've got to change your mindset about this. Basically, the possibilities are limitless. You're not invincible, but you're capable of way more than you thought you were. And I think we all are.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So let's talk a little bit more on the physical training. So a previous kind of guest, John Fern, I believe he kind of like mapped out your training. So what did that entail?
So John was my kind of guiding light, and I had this, because there's so much information out there, not just sort of in the polar world, but in the adventure space and training and equipment and, you know, friends and family. Everyone's got an opinion, and if you listen to all of that, then it's just kind of it's really crowded in your head, and you're like, yeah, but they said that, and you know, you can sort of gather a few doubts in your mind. And so I had this sort of circle of trust: my expedition manager, my stepmother, and my coach. And I had to totally trust John that he was going to get me to a point where I was ready. And so I didn't question any of the training plan. If he told me to do it, I was going to do it. But it was a bit of an exploratory journey for both of us, because he'd never done such a long range expedition preparation for a client before. But that he's now gone on to do that for other people. And so we kind of, I was the guinea pig, and he had me doing, I lay in some rivers. I got up at 5 a.m. to go and do hill reps, and the 5 a.m. wasn't actually in the training plan, but just to kind of fit it into the day. And it was really progressive. And certainly at the beginning, I was definitely of the view that, you know, every training session should be 100%. You should be totally done in by the end of every session, and, you know, totally smash it. And that really wasn't the approach. And some of the time I was actually thinking, do you know what? I wonder if this is hard enough. I wonder if this is going to be the right thing. But I never had an injury. I always had the energy to, you know, it was hard to go out and train, and, you know, 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day, but I always had enough in the tank to go and train. And I got to the start line, and I was in by some kind of expertise from John, and, you know, Miracle and all the rest of it. I was ready. And I think that is, and for the expedition and the preparation, has been really one of my key kind of lessons in life that has really stayed with me, and that is consistency. So that is, for me, the really kind of key thing, because I didn't smash it every day. I didn't, like, you know, run up mountains or anything like that. It was incremental, but I did it consistently. And that was my approach to actually getting to the South Pole as well. You know, I'm definitely not the fastest. I'm 5'5", so I'm not massive. I'm not, you know, a big built soldier like the guys that did the original traverse that I was so inspired by. You know, I'm just kind of ordinary. But I think if you chip away at something for long enough, you know, that turns into a kind of massive whole.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what about the mental side? Because I've heard you speak that the mental side was also very important to the success. So was there any kind of like training you did in that kind of area?
I think it was really hard to train for the mental side, because you just don't know. I knew what to expect to a degree, having done Greenland, but you just don't know how it's going to be for such an extended period of time. And I think, so some of the physical training was helpful. So, you know, the lying in rivers, and I actually don't think there was much physical benefit to going and doing that, you know, 6 months before an expedition, but it was making yourself do things that you would really rather not be doing.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of that, and that definitely got me out of the tent every morning. But I wonder if it's a bit like somebody sort of running like Forrest Gump, or there's a guy called Eddie Izzard in the UK who did a huge number of marathons back to back, and he didn't do them super fast, but he just kept running, and he gained some fitness along the way. So I wonder if there's an element of the mental side where you gain a bit of mental fitness along the way. But I can honestly say that was far, far harder than the physical side of it.
Yeah.
And getting out of the tent every morning, certainly for the first sort of 3 weeks of the 42 days, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I sort of woke up in the morning, realized I was still in Antarctica, and had to go and, you know, ski for 11, 12 hours a day again. And there was like a ton of crying. And then weirdly though, as soon as I got out the tent and I was all packed up and good to go, then I felt better. I was kind of then skiing to the next camp. I was skiing to sort of a nice sit down and some rest, and then felt better. So I kind of talked myself into it every single day. And after the sort of halfway point, it did start to feel a little bit better. But I wonder if some of that was built up during the trip.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So, well, let's talk a little bit about the prep before we talk about the actual expedition again. So it was 5 years in the kind of making. So as you said, it was basically continuously, incremental steps to get into the end goal. What about the funding? Because that must have been a big challenge, because it's quite expensive, isn't it? So I read somewhere you mentioned it was something like $300,000. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about the exchange rates, but it was about £56,000, and that was just for the flights and logistics support. That didn't cover kit, equipment, food, training trips to Greenland, all the sort of other additional costs that just go with mounting an expedition like that. So I had to go cap in hand to companies, and it was just, the people who did support me, I will be forever grateful, because I came to them saying, here I am, I haven't really done anything, but give me some money and it's going to be great. And I had lots of good things to put to that, and lots of the values of the expedition were to do with inspiring women. There were some science projects, so there were things that I could give to them, but really it felt like I was saying support this unknown, and it without any sort of credibility, really. So the people that did support me really took a chance on it being a success, and getting the money was almost as hard as the expedition itself. And it's such an emotional roller coaster, because I went to some pretty big companies and got pretty close in some cases to getting quite big sums, and I'd be in boardrooms, putting out my stall and pitching my case, and then they'd say or go quiet, or they'd just say no thank you, and then you'd be kind of down in a slump. But then you've got to really, the next day you might have another call with someone, or a journalist, and you just had to keep believing that it was going to happen, because otherwise people can tell, you go in there and you're not fully invested in it yourself. Why would you expect anybody else to? So having to keep going with the training when you didn't have the money, and thinking I'm definitely going to make this happen, it's definitely worth this 5 a.m. start, not really having the money. And everyone always says it comes in like as you're getting on the plane, and it was not far off from that. So I had a brilliant company called Bridges, and they're pretty local to me, and I went to speak to them. They gave me a bit of money, and then they realized that because of Brexit, the bill was payable in dollars. So every day that I woke up when it was 5 cents down against the dollar, that was $500 that I had to pay on the exhibition costs. And every day that I didn't pay it was getting more expensive. So I was stuck in this like vicious circle. And 2 weeks before I flew to South America, the guy rang me up, Matt, thank you so much, and said, whatever it is, we'll cover it. We just want to get you on that plane. And so that I slept like properly for the first time in I don't know how long, but it was really kind of down to the wire.
Okay. And what advice would you give to anyone else who's got, is hoping to achieve something similar to yourself and is looking for funding? What tips do you have for them?
So again, it took me a long time, because I didn't have that network of people that I could just ring up and say, hey, what do you think about this? I had to really sit down and think about, where are those people? Where do they go, either virtually or actually? And when I was fundraising, it was a lot more actually. So it was a lot of shoe leather, and I had to go to lots of events. I networked like a demon to try and build this kind of collection of people who might be able to help. And if they didn't, and sometimes people can't help for lots of reasons, but then go back to them and say, okay, I totally get that. What about your network? Is there anybody in your network that you think might be interested in supporting this? And some people just got it. My first sponsor that came in was Animal Dynamics, and I was just chatting to them, completely like not really pitching but obviously it's a big topic of conversation for me, because it was always uppermost in my mind. So I was just chatting away, telling them about it, and they were like, we'll get behind this. And that sort of started the ball rolling. And then as soon as you've got one sponsor, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, but you've got one company that you can say, this great company supported me, it does draw other people in. So even if it's, and so what I asked for, which is actually worked quite well, was not one key sponsor to give me tens and tens of thousands of pounds, but lots of smaller pitches. Companies came in with smaller amounts of money. So I had quite a big range of sponsors,
Yep.
lots of smaller amounts. And then they were sort of part of this kind of community of organizations that had backed me. And at the send off, it was really, it was quite a sort of quite moving to see how many people had come out in support of the expedition. And I suppose of me, I need to kind of get away slightly from saying it was all about the expedition.
Yeah.
And were willing to believe in me. So yeah, that was, but it was an uphill struggle, and it's a whole other, it's a whole hour of, maybe even longer, a whole day of how do you get a sponsor. But building a network is really, really important, even if you don't have one in the space that you're looking to get into. So that's one thing. And the other thing was, so it's a bit like applying for a job. You don't just send out the same CV to 20 people.
Yeah.
You tailor everything to their company, to their values, to which parts of your expedition speak to them, whether that's environmental or the scientific angle, or about sort of gender inequality, and make it individual for them, and send it to a person. That's the other thing. So trying to find a person rather than marketing at, I tried every single thing. So I've tried and failed at lots of different aspects, the fundraising part. And I've tried, sending it to marketing at, and I've tried sort of speculative letters, and they just don't work. You need to have that in, and that, that does take time. So that's why it was for me. I mean, if you had loads of money and you could just pay the money and go, and you've got the experience, that's slightly different. But for me, I had to really work at that side of it as well over a long period.
Yep. No, brilliant. So the last question before we talk about the actual expedition, what about balancing family life and the full-time job? I mean, because a lot of people will be asking the question, because that'll be the big limiter. I've got kids, I've got a full-time job. How am I going to be able to do something like this?
I didn't have a social life for probably a year, 18 months. And if I did go out, it had to be something to do with the expedition. If I read a book or watched a film, it had to be something to do with the expedition. The multitasking thing, lunging to parents' evening, what can you do in a lunch hour? What can you do in the hours between 5 and the school run? That time is there. And it was actually, looking back, it was relentless.
Yeah.
Is the best word to describe it, but totally worth it. Oh my God, totally worth it. Worth all the kind of early mornings and I just like the amount I had to eat in the run up to it as well, and everything in my mind was sort of focused on the expedition, and my poor employers were probably tearing their hair out. So I'd go to work and I'd do a day's work, but certainly in my heart I was sort of at the back of my mind, everything was ticking over about what do I do about this, and who do I speak to today to move things forward.
Okay, so now expedition. So basically you go to South America. So how are you feeling now? So you're about to kind of like set off on something that's you spent 5 years planning for, training for. So how are you feeling?
Terrified. Honestly terrified. I was thinking about all the things that could go wrong. I'm going to lose my tent, I'm going to ski the wrong way, I'm going to make a mess of things, and they're going to say, oh, we knew you could never do it anyway.
Yeah.
And who they were, I've absolutely no idea. Nobody actually would ever have sort of wanted that, I don't think. But and I kept having to try and counter that with more positive messages to myself. You just trust the training and the experience. You can do this. All you can do is your best. And those things really kind of fought out in my head and I wasn't sleeping that well. But I think those things are quite universal to sort of big expeditions before you head off. But then, they gave me, you go to the logistics company, you hand over your pulk, your sled, and all your kit, and you just sort of keep your passport and so on. And they take that off, and they give you a boarding card, and the boarding card says, flight to Antarctica. And even now thinking about it, I feel quite emotional, because that boarding card represented so much hard work, so so much sacrifice, so much kind of investment in every possible way, meaning of the word. And I just was like crying, and it became sort of a bit of a crying expedition, because everything meant so much. This was my one shot. I was just going to put everything into it. But getting that boarding card, because I'd seen other people get this boarding card. I've been down to South America a couple of times to help launch other expeditions, and I'd said at the time, the last time I went down there before my own expedition, I said I'm never coming back here unless I'm getting on that plane. And just for that actually to have come true was, that was a dream come true before I'd even started on the expedition, just to be able to go to Antarctica. So every single bit of the whole, going down South America, preparing, getting this boarding card, getting on the plane to Antarctica was, it was literally unbelievable to me. I was like, I can't actually honestly believe that I'm lucky enough to have this opportunity that so few people get to have.
Yeah, it must have been an incredible feeling. So you get on the plane, and then basically you arrive in Antarctica, and then what happens next?
So you come in on this big cargo plane, and it's rented from the Russians every year. So it's a big Aleutian, and so this plane has no passenger windows. So you're it's got seats, but they also fill it up with gear and resupplies. So you're sat in these normal passenger seats, but you can't see Antarctica as you're flying in, and it's a 4.5 hour flight from South America. So it lands on a blue ice runway, and then it kind of, instead of braking, it just eventually slows to a stop. And then they opened the door, and I for the first time I saw Antarctica, and it was as beautiful and stunning and overwhelming as I dreamed of. And I was crying again coming down the steps. One of the bosses of the logistics company just happened to be at the bottom of the steps and just kind of gathered me in and was like, yeah, this does it to me every time too. And it's just such a spectacular and special place. Then I spent 48 hours in a logistics base called Union Glacier, and you get your fuel, you have a comms check, they give you a GPS tracker, and you wear that all the time when you're out on expedition. And the layers of safety are multiple. So I had a sat phone, I had this tracker, I had my own sort of GPS device. You have to make a scheduled call once every 24 hours. And if you don't do that for 2 calls, then they come and rescue you whether you want it or not from your last known location. So they and every year the kind of the safety side of it is more. So you have all your safety checks, and then you wait for a weather window, and that can be a couple of days, or it could be 10 days, or you just wait. And I think expeditions like that really teach you a bit of patience, because we were delayed for 5-6 days in South America, and I kept moving because I'd run out of money by that point. I kept moving from, slightly shittier Airbnbs every time time I was the next morning, and it was delayed again, until eventually we left. So and then they take you in a little ski plane, a Twin Otter, to the start point. And even then I was there with another soloist called Neil, and one other team. But even then they dropped us all off, ski plane took off. I was waiting for everybody else to get going, just so I didn't make a mistake and embarrass myself and ski off in the wrong direction. But then after a couple of days I kind of got into it, and I was like, actually, I'm sort of navigating in what I think is the right direction, and turns out it was the right direction. And I can put my tent up. Hey, this is okay, I can do this. And then about day 3 or 4, there was quite a bad storm, and it wasn't as bad as the storms that I'd experienced in Greenland. So in a lot of ways, Greenland is a perfect place to go and experience polar conditions, because you get everything there. And so to protect yourself from a storm, and I had a message from the base saying, fortify your tent, there's a storm coming. And that requires you to dig a sort of I guess like a little hole for your tent, and sort of pitch. And the snow that I dug out, I then made into what looks like a dry stone wall made of snow. So a little snow wall in the direction of the wind, and you hope it's going to stay in that general direction, And the prevailing wind is sort of from the pole, so you're reasonably safe to do that. And then I sat out a storm for 12 hours, and it was sort of at that point that it occurred to me that I'm going to be out here for a really, really, really long time, and my patience is zilch. I'm the most impatient person in the world. So to have sort of monastic patience to be making these tiny increments of progress so it's 600 nautical miles, so it's 715 ordinary miles, but it's 600 nautical miles, and I was making about 15 nautical miles a day on average.
Yep.
And those tiny increments of progress, you can sort of, it could actually send you insane, I think, if you thought about it in the whole. So I tried not to. I tried to break it down into as tiny chunks as made it bearable. And inside my tent, I actually, when you see people in sort of old prison films, they draw a tally, don't they, a sort of gate tally. So instead of doing that, because every day kind of rolls, it's hard to keep track sometimes. The only way I could keep track was that I numbered all my food bags, so I knew what day it was. But when I come into the tent at the end of the day, I draw a little heart on the inside of my tent with Sharpie to kind of trick myself into thinking, wow, I love it out here. I've spent another day super happy. But it was challenging every single day.
So how did you deal with the isolation? I know you mentioned you drew to heart, but you do have some contact, don't you? So you talk to a logistics company, you message some people. So what other things kind of like were helping you deal with, because you're out there, you got nothing to see, no one's around you, you're just you in this tent, and then everyone should know it was like 42 days of the same. Most people can't imagine being 1 day, 2 days without anyone.
We're not very often on our own, are we? So it's a really weird existence. And so I spoke to my exhibition manager every single night, and that was, he's been and done several journeys in Antarctica, so that was my saving grace, really, that he said, I know it's hard, but just do another day. And so that was really good. And I had this little app that the GPS could talk to my phone, so I get in the night in after days skiing and hook up all my solar panel and all my comms kit, and then the messages from my family would start pinging in, and that really kind of kept me going. And it was just news from home: Boris has won the election, such and such has happened, and obviously I was away on Christmas Day as well. So that was, that really was like a highlight of the day. And then other really weird things like I did a power pose. You've probably heard about this, like a Superman power pose or Superwoman to the sun every single morning. Like, ridiculous, no one could see me, but it was almost like I've made it through another day, I'm going to do this. And it became almost like a superstitious thing, like I had to do it. I could barely see the sun because it was like cloudy. And then I had my hearts, and then I'd written messages on the inside of my tent as well, which, messages from friends, messages to myself. And it's really interesting, actually. The messages from my friends were all really positive. They were all really kind of, you can do this, and you can choose your attitude, and you've got this, and we believe in you, and all that kind of thing. And the messages to myself were pretty harsh. They were like, stop crying, start skiing, things like that. But I know that kind of really helps me. It doesn't help me to go, oh, poor you're having a really terrible time. It helps me to go, like, come on, you chose to be here. This is a privilege that people don't, most people never get to enjoy. You're almost duty bound to kind of keep going. So that was all really helpful. And then I just, like we were talking about before, broke it down into the smallest possible manageable chunks that I could. So I'd be thinking when I got up in the morning and after the crying, rolled up my tent and stuck that in my poke and got skiing, I'd be thinking, right, when I get into the tent tonight, what can I look forward to? And I had 3 tubes of Pringles. I should definitely be sponsored by Pringles, because I was obsessed by these Pringles and realized I should have taken like a tub a week rather than 3 tubs of the whole thing. So I was down pretty quickly. I was down to rationing my Pringles to 2 Pringles a night. So I'd be looking forward to my Pringles. I had this crystalline ginger, which sounds, normally I wouldn't eat it, but things taste different because they're all sort of frozen. And I became obsessed with like my 2 pieces of crystalline ginger and my 2 Pringles and all the things I could look forward to. And I had audiobooks, so I thought I'd like really want to enjoy the silence, but I definitely didn't. I tried that and it was like, no, I need something. Music really drove me mad as well, because you're you're skiing along and you're listening to a song, but you're not really. You're thinking, well, the song's like 3.5, 4 minutes, so if I ski for like 10 songs, I can check my watch, and then I can see whether I'm, you know, closer to the break or not. And
Yeah.
you end up thinking like that and not at all like about the music, and it started really annoying me. And so I had audiobooks which I relied on really heavily, and the more inspiring audiobooks were the ones that I listened to again and again. So I listened to something about the beginnings of the Special Air Service, the SAS in the war, and I must have listened to that 4 times, because it was just like the things that they went through. I was thinking, you know, I don't have any of those problems. I can always call for, you know, if I've had enough, that I can call and just get me out of here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of range of things that helped me, that was sort of mental coping strategies. But I definitely, I mean, I miss my kids so much, and I don't know if that was because I sort of put all my kind of like mental struggle of the expedition into that particular, I miss my kids, or, you know, it was sort of genuine. But I started visualizing what it would be like to be home, and I actually dreamed of going. I dreamt most nights actually that I was like on a break from this expedition and I got to go home. But the visualization was sitting in front of a roaring fire, watching rubbish TV,
Yeah.
eating tea and toast. And every single day that I thought about it, the visualization became a bit more detailed. You know, what was I wearing? Where was I sitting? And I kind of lived off that actually for, you know, for weeks at a time. So it's a combination of things, I suppose. You have sort of different tools in your armory, and then, you know, you can always find something in a sort of Pollyanna-ish way to be glad about. So, you know, sometimes the conditions were like horrendous, but, you know, at least the ground was firm, and you know, it wasn't steeply uphill, or
Yeah.
you know, the conditions were better, but the wind was bad, but you know, you can see where you're going. So that was something to be glad, you know, really grateful for. And someone had said to me, focus on everything that's good. So it's really hard, it's really easy to start thinking, oh, you know, my feet hurt, or I'm tired, or my goggles are fogged up, and, you know, focus on those things, and that can get you into a really negative spiral. But if you can just try and you know, think, well, you know, at least I don't have any gear issues, I don't have any medical problems, you know, the sun is shining, or, you know, I'm almost there. Whatever it is, there's always something that a positive you can take.
Yep. No, brilliant. So how does it give people a perspective what it's like a day for you? Like, because it's like 11, 12 hours. A lot of people don't realize you're actually pulling like 86 kilos, I believe, which is, you know, quite a lot. So, and then, you know, you just have to do the miles, don't you, to kind of like achieve your objectives. So physically, how does it feel? And then, you know, what does it look like when you're actually out there?
It's 360-degree white horizon, and you imagine that that's just going to look the same every day, but every single day looked and felt different somehow. So sometimes, though, certainly at the beginning of the journey, there was some mountains to look at, and, you know, it'd take you sort of a week to approach these mountains and get past them, and then there'd be there's a tiny airstrip halfway along the journey, so you kind of be thinking about making your way towards that. And then when you come across it, and it's like a couple of tiny flags that you can spot from so far away, because everything man-made really stands out. It's like finding life on Mars, because I hadn't seen, you know, or trace of the existence of another human being or animal or anything for, you know, 2-3 weeks. But yeah, every single day did feel different, and, you know, different conditions, and the ice under the skis felt very different. And there's about 100 miles of really bad sastrugi, and the sastrugi is these like wind-blown sort of scoops almost. If you imagine a ploughed field, but or a really rough sea, it was almost like waves of ice.
Yeah.
And just getting through those was like, you really have to dig deep mentally and physically, because, you know, you have to go around them. If you decide to go down one, you might just kind of, and in a complete whiteout, you know, it can be pretty dangerous if you're trying to negotiate this sastrugi, which can be sort of 6 foot up and 6 foot down into a sort of gap as well. So that, and I honestly, I fell over every single day bar about 2 as well, because I'm not a competent skier. And, you know, just falling over and trying to get back up on your skis and get going again, it just kind of takes it out of you every time that happens. So but yeah, I mean, I just kind of kept thinking, just put one ski in front of another, and, you know, you eventually that small progress makes a big journey.
Yep.
So the isolation, it's interesting, because I never once felt lonely. occasionally I felt alone. I saw another soloist, and that made me kind of feel kind of pretty vulnerable and alone for a couple of days after I saw what they looked like. I thought, well, that's how I look. But you're so focused. It's probably akin to, I'm a skydiver as well, so akin to the moment when you jump out of a plane until you land, or if you're a climber, or anything that requires a sort of really full focus. You're so focused on, am I too hot? Am I too cold? Is that a crevasse? Do I need to ski over there? Am I navigating correctly? Is my gear okay? How long till the next break? And those things kind of fill your brain. So you don't really stop to think about, I'm alone, or this is dangerous. You don't think about that at the time.
Yeah.
You're thinking about all the things you need to do that you've trained for to sort of keep you safe.
No, awesome. So how did it feel when 42 days and then you're approaching the South Pole? So how did that feel?
But it wasn't just the 42 days, and that's what really kind of struck me. It was 5 years and 42 days, and I had skied for 12 hours or 11 hours. I put my tent up and I had this feast of everything I had left, so I like gorged myself on the remaining 10 Pringles, and had all my dried food and made a big feast. But instead of going to bed because it's 24-hour daylight, instead of getting into my sleeping bag and resting, I thought, you know what, I was too excited to sleep anyway, and I set off again. So probably after about 3 hours of that sort of final leg, I saw something on the horizon, and it looked like a kind of toy submarine or something. It was tiny, and I just thought, do you know what? It can only be the South Pole. The South Pole is a massive science station, and it's visible from, as it turns out, almost a day's skiing away. And it was that moment, more so than actually reaching the pole, actually, when I just thought, 5 years of sacrifice and effort and training and crying and all the rest of it, and 42 days of real hardship out alone in this wilderness and all those miles. This is the moment when I realized I'm going to actually do this thing. I'm going to succeed. It's going to happen for me. And I've done it without anything going wrong, which all those people that I was thinking they are never gonna, they're always going to say, oh, we never thought you could do it anyway.
Yeah.
All those feelings kind of evaporated, and it was replaced by this kind of, actually, you've done this, you've done something. And it's only 7 women in history have done that particular journey. So there's an 8th person that's done, Felicity Aston, who did from a different. So there's an 8th person called Felicity Aston who's done a route from a different start point.
Yeah.
So now, and it was at that moment that I became, I'm going to do this. I became one of those 7 women in history, and it's honestly an incredible moment that I keep going back to. And I think lockdown's been hard for everyone in different ways, and there've been challenges, and and I keep thinking back to that and thinking, you've skied to the South Pole, of course you can do whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about the hardest thing you've ever done, and how to kind of stretch your comfort zone. And once you've done something that is not sort of panic zone, but stretch and challenge zone for you, and you achieve that, then you can go on to go, right, I've done that, how can I make that comfort zone a bit bigger? And that is kind of how you make progress, how you grow.
So what's next for you? So do you have another adventure planned, another trip back to Antarctica?
I'd love to go back to Antarctica. It's such a special place. There's something really, and I think it kind of gets under your skin. Anyone that's ever been there will tell you, they just dream about going back. And I think it's probably a bit like childbirth, that you forget all the bad things about childbirth and young children, and just remember the good things. So the thing about being on expedition alone in somewhere like that is that it's actually quite addictive. All the hardships is one thing, but then you strip away all the complexities and life is really simple. All you've got to do is ski south. Yeah. That's all you've got to do. That is your one clear, unambiguous objective every single day. And it's quite meditative a lot of the time, and you know, I'll probably be like, I'll get back there and I'll be, you know, 2 days in thinking, oh, what the hell was I thinking? This was fun.
Yeah.
And there's a great quote from Apsi Cherry Garrard from back in the sort of golden age of polar exploration, and I can never get the wording exactly, but it's basically, you know, polar travel is the cleanest, most awful way of having a bad time ever devised or something. And it's like, but it's also this incredible, peaceful, immersive experience that takes you away from the everyday life, and that's what draws people back, I think.
Yeah. And do you have a next adventure planned?
There's always something. I've got lots of ideas. I think I think the cure for the post-exhibition blues for me was to go and do something different, to plan something else. But because of lockdown and COVID, that didn't happen immediately. So I've kind of coped with that post-expedition life, and given time, you kind of get back to a bit more of normality. But definitely something polar. You know, there's a few things out there. There's lots of things out there that haven't been done. There's a few things out there that, you know, I would like to try, and it does make you think that those kind of possibilities are limitless.
Yep. No, great. So now let's talk about some of the takeaways, because like I believe one of the things you were looking to do on your expedition was also talk about human resilience, especially for females. So what's, you know, what would be the message you would give to other females about resilience?
There's a few things, I think. So certainly being older, I think has helped. It's given me more resources from life experience to deal with the ups and downs of getting to the start line, the ups and downs of expedition life, and you can deal with things a bit more with a bit of equanimity, with a bit more acceptance. You learn through life what you can control and what you can't. And certainly the sort of weather and what everybody else might or might not have been doing in Antarctica were big things there. So I definitely think that helped, gave me more to draw on because I was a bit older. But actually, the fact that I didn't even really start planning this until my late 30s and didn't complete it until I was 42, the thing, you know, that I think certainly for mothers in particular, because I spent kind of the best part of 20 years being a mum, and a lot of my friends who are similar age to me, mid 40s, early 50s, their kids are growing up, they've got more spending power, they're, you know, looking at life opportunities, thinking, I've got the time to do this. And the number of my friends who have run PBs, they are going out and doing extraordinary things, they're actually finding the time to go and do some of those challenges. You know, this is our time now, and I really feel like that, you know, that this is for women, and you know, so to a certain extent for men, who this is our kind of stage in life now, for thinking, you know, how can I challenge myself, how can I push those boundaries now.
No, awesome. And goal setting, like you know, you've setting big challenges and being able to achieve them. So what's your particular process, or what would be your advice, tips for anyone else?
I'm really good at visualizing sort of big strategic outcomes, but look at where you want to end up. Is that a particular job? Is that a particular expedition? Is that a marathon? And what are the steps that you need to do to make that happen, and break it down into as smaller steps as are manageable for you. And start now, start today. If it's a marathon, join a running club. If it's a big expedition, speak to somebody who's done that expedition. And just keep chipping away at it, because consistency achieves the goals.
No, awesome. So so now that you've been on one big adventure, so what's your definition of adventure?
Oh, great question. I think there's so much, you know, I think because our worlds have all become smaller during COVID, you know, you've had to go and find the adventure in the everyday, or I certainly have. You know, I've taken up some new sports and noticed the world around me a bit more, the world that's closer to me a bit more. And I think just doing something different that puts you out of your comfort zone, that challenges you in some way, that makes you feel like you're connected with the world. I think that's what adventure has certainly meant to me since I kind of started down this road.
Okay. And then why do you think people need to include a little bit more adventure in their life?
Oh, this we're so risk averse now, right? We're so risk averse. I think it was Alex Honnold who said, who's the climber who did free solo. He said, no one achieves anything, no one achieves greatness sat comfortable on the sofa. And it's so true. So many people have said to me, oh, you're crazy wanting to do something like that. But to
Yeah.
me, crazy is, I consider sitting on the sofa watching TV a complete waste of my life. And so, I think if you get out there, and it just makes your life more full and more real, doesn't it? Actually living the adventure, not just watching it.
Yep. No, definitely. And what's your definition, or what do you think ageless living means?
I don't even think about my age. I don't even think about it. So it's back to that self-limiting belief, isn't it? So I'm really fortunate that I am physically fit and able, regardless of age. But I never even think about it. To be honest, it's similarly to how I often think about being a woman. I don't often think, oh, I'm a woman skiing to the South Pole, but the conversation is there, and so I want to kind of engage with that. But I never see it as, oh, I can't do that because I'm a woman, or I can't do that because I'm, over 40. It just doesn't even enter my head.
Yep.
Just don't
No.
think about it.
Yep. Perfect. So, and then what would you say to 40-year-olds or someone who's recently turned 40, is approaching 40, and they're kind of like viewing it negatively or have some kind of anxiety, because a lot of people are going, oh my God, I'm turning 40. It means it's all downhill. Well, but both of us have a different perspective. So, but what's your perspective on that? What would you
I
say to
think
these people?
if you speak to most people who are over 40, they would say that's absolutely never the case, because you've spent all this time collecting experiences and learning about yourself and learning about the world, and this is your time now to, a bit like the Goonies, this is our time to go and unleash ourselves on the world, and make a difference and do all those things that, because of financial or family or all those constraints, just don't feel like they're as tightly bound anymore. And there's still so much achievement to be had post 40, more so in some ways, I think.
Awesome. No, like your attitude. Definitely a good message. So, do you have a life motto?
So I had a tattoo. I don't know if you probably can't see this on the screen, but I had a tattoo written, a post Antarctic tattoo, and I'm a big Shackleton fan. um, I'm fortunate enough now to work for a company that bears his name. He wasn't like, hugely successful in some ways, but he was an incredible leader, and just lived his life in a really, in a way that I would want to live my life. And his family motto is, by endurance we conquer. And it sounds kind of, quite depressing that you have to endure things to achieve, but it's more about, putting the work in. You put the work in, and you can do something incredible.
No, very good. So, three life lessons you've learned in life that you would like to share with other people, or you think would have a good impact or a measurable impact on their lives?
Oh, you're hitting me with all the big ones. So I would say back to consistency. Consistency is key. Optimism, it's not really a kind of a message, or but it's definitely a way I live my life, and it's helped me, enormously, certainly on expedition. So consistency, optimism, and humor, the just ability to laugh at, most things. I had a great editor. I used to work in newspapers, and I had a great editor called Mike. And Mike used to say, well, very few things matter much, and most things hardly matter at all. And getting a bit of perspective and humor to how things are, when it's you I don't know, you've dropped your coffee or you've lost your keys, and all of
Yeah.
those things, then they're the small things. The big things are the more important ones.
Yep. Brilliant. Last question. What is your definition of living your best life, or what I call a legendary life?
Again, a massive question. So my value that, that I try and live by is, I just want to make the world a better place. And it's like, that sounds like totally grandiose actually when I say it out loud, but it's like, not necessarily for the whole world, but even if it's just inspiring one person to go and do something, or picking up litter in your local area, or making your kids feel like they believe they can do anything. It's the small things, again, it's small things that add up to a big picture. And yeah, that's kind of how I want to I want to leave the world a better place, and I found it.
Awesome. No, very good goal. So, Wendy, it's been wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's been very inspirational for myself. And I'm sure it'll be very inspirational for a lot of other people out there. So, for anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about yourself, how can they find you online?
My Instagram is at Between Snow and Sky, and my expedition website, where you can read all the blogs of the crying, is southpole2020.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing what next adventure you have planned.
Thank you so much for having me on.